Aloha! Today, hoje eu tenho um grande amigo meu, uma pessoa que me influenciou na minha vida toda, um cara assim que não tem nem palavra para descrever, é um cara assim que é o meu guru da minha vida, né? E ele é um cara assim que é meu amigo há 54 anos e hoje vai ser uma das entrevistas mais legais que eu já fiz aqui no Aloha Podcast. E esse cara se chama Mr. Randy Rarick, my great friend that I met in 1972 in California. How are you, Randy?
Aloha, Rico de Souza. It's good to hear from you. And from the North Shore of Hawaii, I say good talking with you and there in Brazil.
Okay, how's the waves? You live in Sunset Beach. How the waves today? You told me it's big, huh?
I just went out and checked the surf, and it's about 15 to 18 foot. And it's really big, breaking on the second reef. And I don't think there'll be too many takers today. Maybe Waimea Bay will be breaking, and we'll see.
And Makaha too. You love Makaha, huh?
Today, Makaha would be really good because it's a north wind, so it'd be offshore there, and would be perfect to go to the west side. But plenty of surf in Hawaii.
Randy, now I'm going to do the advertising for my sponsors, you know. I want to thank you very much. We have Água Sanitária Qboa, is to clean the house, to clean everywhere, to make you hygienic. And we also have this Sense, is for people who run, who do jiu-jitsu, judo, who make a transpire. So it would be good to use. It's very good, smells very good, you know. I have Tier. Tier is a company who commercializa energia. It's the biggest comerciador of energy independent. Sustentabilidade e energia. Muito obrigado. Randy, I want to thank you, AGR também. And I have a little present for you. I think I have to go to Hawaii to give to you. That's a good excuse to go to Hawaii. Take a look. This is for you. Do you like?
Aloha. You know what, Rico? You already gave me one.
But you deserve two because
All right.
you deserve two because
Well,
I have to tell Randy, I don't have words in my English to say thank you for everything you teach me in my life. We first start meet you in California in 1972 for the World Championship of San Diego in Ocean Beach, right?
Yeah. So for the listeners, when I first met you, you had very long hair. You were super skinny, and you could barely speak any English. But I saw in you a kindred spirit. That means somebody similar to me, that you had the desire to learn surfing, and you wanted to go out around the world. And so that's when, in 1972, I mean, that's over 50 years ago now, and we became friends at that stage, and here we are 54 years later.
Yeah, you know, I arrived in California. I live 2 hours from the beach, and was hard to get to the beach, was a difficult time. Where is calling you? Somebody calling you?
So, Rico, I can't hear you.
Okay. Hein? Esse telefone é onde? Lá. Okay, just a minute.
Yep, there we go. Okay.
So, how was San Diego in 1972? Ocean Beach, small waves, cold water.
Yeah, back then, that was before professional surfing. So in 1972, the world contest, the first one had been in Australia, the second one was in Peru, the third one was in California, the fourth one was in Puerto Rico, and then in Australia in 1970. And so 72 was the last of the world championships for amateur surfing. That was before professional surfing. So all the top surfers were there, and it was not about money in those days. It was about the prestige. And if you won the world championship, you were considered the best surfer in the world. So the waves were small, and it was very controversial. And quite honestly, that 72 contest was the end of amateur world surfing. And after that, professional surfing came into being in 1976 when Fred Hemmings and I started the world tour. So that was the end of an era and in between the beginning of the next era.
Randy, I remember very clear the Hawaiian team, Ben Aipa, Rena Vilira, Mark Ladell, Michael Ho, Sochi Behikanapuni, great surfers. And I remember Ben Aipa was doing the swallowtail, and the Hawaiian teams were so good, so much better riding the swallowtail that people cut the tail to make the board surf better. Remember that?
Yeah, well, that was, right after shortboards came along in 1970 was the beginning of the first shortboard world championship. And so by 1972, everybody was on a shortboard. Longboards were finished. And like you said, the world team from Hawaii was probably the strongest team. And, little Michael Ho was about 14 years old back then. And as you said, Ben Aipa cut the tail into what we call a swallowtail. So it had a tail that looked like that. And that revolutionized, designs for the next couple of years. And so really back then there was, only surf magazines and once in a while a surf movie. There was no YouTube, there was no social media yet. And so when everybody got together, it was a gathering of the tribe and surfers from around the world. Like you came from Brazil and there was Australians and South Africans, but Hawaii had the best team in that time. And of course, Jimmy Blears from Hawaii ended up winning the title and was the final amateur world champion. So design wise, that's where people got their ideas to progress contemporary surfboard design.
Yeah, it was really good because I remember I surfed in the heat with Mark Richards, Andrew McKinney, and so good, see the Australians, Hawaiians, only me from Brazil, have some California, but Mark Purpose, very, very few guys, no? South Africa.
Yeah, I think that was what we call a changing of the guard, which in English means, a changing from one generation to another. So you had guys like Paul Strow, who back in the 60s was considered one of the best surfers from Hawaii. He was still on the team. But then on the other hand, you had guys like Michael Ho, who, like I said, was 14, 15 years old at the time. And
Buttons.
Well, Buttons wasn't even at that stage, not even competing yet. So it was a whole new generation. Larry Bertelman, Michael Ho, those are the next generation. So guys like Barry Kanaipuni and Paul Strow and even Ben, were fading away. That was the old guard, and the new guard was coming on. And that was like I said, in the Australians, a new younger group with Mark Richards, Peter Townend, who made the finals, and a whole new generation of surfers were changing over during 1972.
When I went to California, I had a chance to meet many good guys, like Hal Jepsen, who used to make surf movies. And then I used to bring the movies from Hal Jepsen and from Alan Rich to Brazil. And no internet, no nothing. So I make a special section and people go to watch. But man, that was crazy. Do you remember that?
For sure. I mean, that was, I was doing the movies in Hawaii at the time with Jack McCoy.
Oh,
that was before Jack, moved to Australia. And like I said, a gathering of the tribe, the way you got people together and the way you saw what was happening in surfing was through surf movies, because there was no internet. There was no videos out yet, really. And it was all about showing a movie and bringing everybody together in a school or a hall or someplace where you could show the film. And the social interaction of that really created a good vibration. So for people to get together, discuss designs, and then watch the film, and then you saw what was happening about 6 months earlier when the film was made, and then that became the next movements of people to progress professional surfing.
I remember very good, and used to show in the movies in theaters, right? And then
Correct.
I bring was a big film, right? 16 millimeters. And I bring to Brazil, and I show here for the friends. Everybody get together. It was looking like a concert, without music, So really nice. Then I start to meet Bill Bain and Mike Doyle in California. And I remember when they was doing the mono ski, before was 2 skis. When I was there in Encinitas, around they have all the fiberglass companies, surfboards, they come out with a ski. Then we went skiing in California. Remember, me, you, and Tuzo, all the crazy guys, And I didn't know how to ski, but I went in a car, black pista. How you say the black ski? How you call?
Like the what was it called?
Rico
winter stick is what they called them.
Yeah.
And it was the idea was you wanted to snow the way you surfed. So by having a single ski, you could carve down the face like that, and it would be like riding a wave. So the idea was to take surfing, incorporate it into skiing, and then take skiing and incorporate it back into surfing. So it was a unique, and Mike Doyle was really, really good on the mono ski. He was excellent on that. So it was a good time. It was a lot of experimentation and a lot of new designs coming out, and some of them were terrible. They worked so junk, but other ones worked really good. And that's how we progressed. Like you said, you get the tribe together of surfers. You see a movie and you get all excited, and the next day you go out and you try to. I remember real quickly, I had my surf shop then, and we had a surf team, and I had Dennis Pang and Glenn Kalikukui and Jimmy Blears and Mark Sedlak and all these guys. And the movie came to me, just like you, the 16 millimeter film, and we put it on for the team, and everybody watched it and went, oh my gosh, this is what's happening. So the next day we go to our local break and try to do all the maneuvers that we saw in the movie. And like I said, that's how things progressed.
I remember we went to Mammoth to snowboarding, and you have beginners, mediums, and high performance. Black when you go inside the car, and then you took me all the way to the top. I looked down the bottom, man, shit. If I don't make a first turn here, I'm gonna slide 400 meters down, And I went, and good time, no scare, huh?
Yeah, that was the Black Diamond run, they call that. And you just go for it. It's like coming here to the North Shore and paddling out to Waimea Bay and just going, okay, I'm going for it.
First day. Randy, after to Hawaii, after California, I went to Hawaii and I didn't know anything about Hawaii. Today, when Brazil, Australia, and California go to Hawaii, they know everything, where to stay, where to go, how to catch. And then I took a bus, and then I arrived midnight in the North Shore. Then I slept under the bridge of Sunset Beach, where the river comes out, And then next day I looked to you and you introduced me to have a house with Ian Cairns, Kanga, Peter Townley, and Mark Ward, one Australian, and Mike Lamont, just in front of Sunset in Cameron. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. No, I remember you showed up on the North Shore. You didn't have a clue what was happening. No idea about surfboards or anything. And it's kind of like for me, the first time I went to Sakurama, I slept on the beach just like you did, because I didn't know what to do, where to go. And like you said, there was no internet, there was no telephones, there was no way to communicate with anybody. You just had to go and, hope for the best. And in your case, it was great because Kanga, Peter Town, and Mark Warren, they were all part of that new younger generation that was trying to make their mark. And same thing, they were the first time in Hawaii. And so it was really kind of an adventurous, exciting time to show up. And you were right in the thick of it, for sure.
And I remember one thing. I live in Cameron, almost in front of Sunset. You can see the channel. Looks beautiful, And I have a band surfboard, 72 with a white tail, single fin. Then I went out in a 10, 12-foot day. And I couldn't catch a wave. I said, something's wrong, Then I catch a smaller wave, 2 or 3 waves. And then come a set and took me the board, you know. Then I was ripping, swimming on a channel, scared like shit, you know. And then I look one board in the channel and say, oh man, I'm gonna catch that board, you know. And then I went paddle for the channel to get the board to get out the water. And the guy, I'm gonna kill you, fucking Holly, I'm gonna kill you. Say, I didn't know, but I know something was wrong, you know, but that's the way I have to do it. And the guy, the Ride of White Man, big guy, he did your house, the Woods, what's his name? Nice guy.
That was Gary Spees.
Tell the boys here how big Gary Spees were.
He was a big gorilla.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's definitely somebody you didn't want against you, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then I get the board and he say, hey, give me the board, give me the board. I start paddling and say, to be killed, better be killed out the water than get drowned, you know. Then I wait for him instead I run away, I stay at the beach and say, sorry, I'm sorry, I was scared. And he was nice to me and we became good friends. I never forget his story.
Well, you know, your listeners probably can't imagine this, but that was before surf leashes. So when you lost your board at sunset, it would catch in the rip and it would go outside Camuland, and if it kept going, it would end up on Kauai. And you had to swim in, swim back out to get your board, then paddle back over to sunset and catch a wave to come in. And if you wiped out again, you had to do the circuit completely like that. So that's when men were men surfing Sunset Beach with no leashes. And if you lost your board, you had to be in good shape to be able to surf at sunset.
Randy, I swear to you, in 72 or 73, before the leash, I went 3 times sunset. I lost one time the board swimming, lost the board again. Only the 3rd time I caught the wave. You know what I mean? Very together, you know. And I think yes.
Good learning experience for sure. You know?
And I tell you something, the worst thing you can do is go to Cameland, you know, and when you lose the board, you paddle all the way to Cameland and the board go back to the beach and you have to swim in from Cameland. There's no nightmare worse than that. Have it happened with you that?
Oh yeah, many a times back in the day. And that's why I say, that's when men were men. You learned to be a good shape, a good swimmer, and you didn't rely on your leash. So you had to know what you were doing for sure.
Randy, come a little bit before. You come to Hawaii with 5 years old, right? From mainland.
Correct. Yep.
And man, it was going to be a dream. How was the North Shore? When we talk about this, I went in 72, you're probably there in 62.
Yeah, when I was a little kid, we used to think of the North Shore as being way out. This was before they made the freeway to the North Shore. So from Honolulu to drive to the North Shore took you 2 hours just to get to the North Shore. And there was no surf reports in those days. So you didn't know if the surf was good or not. So you drove along what was called Cam Highway and you would get out there. And as you're driving to the North Shore, you would see a car coming with a surfboard on top. And so you would go like this with thumbs up or thumbs down. You go like that. And if the guys gave you the thumbs up, you kept driving, and because it meant the surf was good. If the guys gave you a thumbs down, you would turn your car around and drive back to Honolulu because you didn't want to spend the gas money to drive 2 hours and then get skunked. So it was very, very rural back in those days. And when I was a little kid, about 10 years old, my father used to take me and drop me off at Haleiwa at Li'i Beach Park, and he would go play golf. And he'd go golfing for 3 or 4 hours and then come back and pick me up. And I'd be all sunburned and I'd be tired from being at the beach for 3 or 4 hours. But I surfed the North Shore at a very young age. And, we didn't want it to be big. When we went to the North Shore, we always wanted it to be very small because that way you knew you could surf. And as you came over the hill from Honolulu, you see the whole North Shore. And if you saw whitewater, you go, oh no, it's too big, And so that's why places like Velzeland on the edge of the North Shore would get surfed because Sunset would be big, or Pipeline or Waimea. And we didn't have the surfboards then. That was when longboards were happening. And longboards were terrible for the North Shore. That's why Makaha on the West Shore was very popular, because the longboard worked very good at Makaha, but it was not very good on the North Shore. It wasn't until the changeover to shortboards that the North Shore became very popular, and that was in the late 60s, early 70s.
Randy, Makaha is a very strong place in Hawaii, no? I think one of the biggest wave ever surfed in Hawaii from the old timers was Makaha Greg Knoll, right?
Yeah, back in the 40s and the 50s, Makaha was the place to go because it was easy to ride a longboard there. The North Shore had what they call a taboo. It was kind of like you don't go to the North Shore, you go to Makaha. And Makaha has Makaha Point, which can hold the surf up to usually about 20 feet. So Makaha, and they used to have what they call the Makaha International, which was a international competition that started in 1954. So every year, all the surfers from around the world would come to Makaha. So Makaha was the center point of surfing back in those days. And because of longboards and the competition at the Makaha International, everybody went to Makaha. And in 1969, the biggest swell that I've ever seen, and I've been surfing for 65 years, came to the North Shore, was completely closed out. It was breaking outside about a mile out to sea. So everybody went around to Makaha, the west side, and it was about 20 to 35 feet. And Greg Knoll, the big wave rider, went out and caught the biggest wave at that stage. And now bigger waves now, of course, at Nazareth and Jaws on Maui, bigger waves than Makaha. But back in those days, in 1969, it was about 15 to 25 feet with 30-foot sets, and Greg Knoll took off, and that was considered the Mount Everest of surfing at that time.
Randy, one thing I like, I really like the Makaha boys. Makaha is a small place, but very local, no? Or people like you or don't like you, right?
Yeah, it's what they call the West Side, and it's a big Hawaiian community there where, because of the social economics of different places on Hawaii, it was where most of the Hawaiians live. So if you want to experience the true Hawaii, you go to the West Side. And if you become friends with the West Side boys, and if they take you in, they're the best people in the world. If they decide that they don't want to know about you, it's the worst place to be. So if you make friends with the Hawaiians, and especially the Hawaiians from the West Side, then you consider yourself having a great Hawaiian experience.
Yeah, I met them with the long time, the Buffalo family, Rusty, his brother, Russ Kelana, Brian Kelana too, Duende Soto, and the last times I went to Makaha, 3 to 5 foot, and all my friends say, go Rico, go Rico. So it's a great feeling, 5, 10 guys out, only Hawaiians, and the guys tell to me, Rico, go on the wave, go on the wave. That's make me very proud,
Well, I think, since you were traveling in the early 70s, that was the era when everybody traveled. And so this community of surfers around the world, if you could befriend surfers from different places, then you could get along in those places. And Hawaii was the worst place to come because everybody wanted to come to Hawaii. So for the Hawaiians, a lot of times, all these surfers coming from different places, they show hospitality, but if you don't return the hospitality, then you have a problem. But in your case, because you traveled so early, you learned what it was. Now, the next generation that came on after you, completely different when they came to the North Shore. The Brazilians invaded en masse to the North Shore, and the Brazil nuts, as they became known, were not well liked because they didn't embrace the Hawaiians and they didn't endear themselves to the Hawaiians.
Respect to be respect, right?
Correct.
Randy,
you show respect, you get respect. Simple as that.
I remember very good in 72 when I lived with Ian Cairns, Mark Warren, PT, Lamont, all the boys. They have a contest, Sea Spirit, and I was the only Brazilian there, so I went to compete. And Haleiwa was 6 to 8 feet, and 8 feet in Haleiwa is big enough, especially with the current, right?
Yep.
In the semifinal, I win Michael Ho. Do you know what I mean? So for me, it was a very special thing. Even I know Michael's 100 times better surfer than me, but we got good friends. Michael, I love him. You know, Michael Ho, his brother Derek that passed away already. You know, so it was good. And then the contest was after 1 or 2 weeks after and finished in a Chance Reef, you know, and Michael won, you know, but was a very good feeling. And I remember very clear, I don't know, was 72 or 73, one guy from Hawaii, Wayne, a Hawaiian Japanese guy, wear a leash, and I saw him wearing a leash in Hawaii. I said, what is fucking going on? I couldn't believe somebody in a big wave like that could. Do you have any memories about leash? I remember in Hawaii, first time I saw it.
Yeah, you know, it was the early 70s. I remember we were just experimenting with leashes, and we would tie them around our. I had a rope, an actual rope, and I tied the rope around my ankle, and I was surfing Makaha, and I lost the board, and the board pulled like that, and the rope went around my ankle, and my ankle was like, and I almost cut my foot off. I was like, oh my gosh, you know, and it was just a rope. It wasn't stretchy at all. And so the board goes, and then pulled my leg, and I almost lost my leg. So the early leashes were terrible.
Yeah.
Then they put the tubing in, and your leash would go out like 20 or 30 meters and then come back and hit you, you know. So it was the early days of leashes were definitely scary.
Randy, I have a very beautiful story. When I went to Peru in 1969 to the summer 70s, it was a Campeonato de Tablas Havaianas, and all the Hawaiians was invited. So I met Paul Strauch, Joy Cabell, Rina Belira, Harold Hawley, you know, all the Hawaiians. Was great. Was the first time I saw have Brett McCall, Mike Purpose, some Australian guys. Have you been to Peru at this time?
I wasn't there for that year, but I came for many of the Peruvian contests after that. So, you know, like you said, it was a gathering, once again, a gathering of what I call the tribe. And when there was a competition, it was when people came together and exchanged ideas. And then you see, you know, people you've heard about or seen in the magazine or seen in a surf movie. And like Paul Stroud, for instance, during the 60s, to me, he was one of the most elegant surfers there was, beautiful style. He made surfing look so easy, and I was really impressed with Paul Stroud. And, you know, there was the big wave guys, Ben Ipa, Paul Stroud,
Cabell,
Fred Hemmings, Joey Cabell, all those older surfers, you know, were the surfers we looked up to. Then the next generation was my generation, which was Jimmy Blears, Jeff Hackman, Jerry Lopez, Reno, of course.
BK.
And so, and BK, and that was the next generation. And then the generation that you came from was the Larry Bertelman, Michael Ho, Mark Liddell. Those kind of guys were the generation from the mid 70s. So each generation, you would look at the older generation and you would see their style and how they surfed, what kind of boards they rode. And you tried to get all the knowledge you could so you could apply that and improve upon that. So that was the difference back in those days. The gathering of everybody really made a difference of, you know, what your decision was on where you wanted to go and how you wanted to take surfing.
Randy, one thing very interesting that I think you're going to agree. Before, on late 60s, early 70s, the style was a very important thing. Like Paul Strauch, like Rina Belira, like Bob Jones, you know. Sometimes the guy is not as a great best surfer in the world, but with his style, he will probably get better judgment. This could be, and compare with today. Today, the style doesn't really matter. Huh?
Yeah, you know, you got to realize we're riding longboards, so they weren't very maneuverable. They were very heavy, and so as Phil Edwards, who was a California surfer, who was considered the best surfer in the world in the early mid 60s, he said trying to make a difficult thing look easy is what was the idea. And so style had much more importance back in those days. So it's how you looked on the wave, because the board unfortunately, didn't make it easy for you. So you tried to make it look good and make it look easy. And that's why, like, for instance, Jerry Lopez at Pipeline, his casual style was very appealing to people. And it wasn't until the mid 70s when the Australians came and they changed the whole thing. Their whole deal was about how to ride a wave aggressively, rip, tear, and lacerate was the slogan. So you take the wave and you rip it apart, you tear the wave apart. And it was completely contrary to the Hawaiian style, where you look good and you make it look easy. And a lot of times the Australians made it look hard. But what it did is it progressed surfing, and contemporary surfing changed from style to performance in the mid 70s. And that was just like, surfing is always ongoing. It's what I call a circle. You going forward, and then you come back and you pick up some of the stuff from the past, you apply that, and then you move forward again. And the circle is really an oval, and it's always continuing to move and move forward. It never stays the same.
Talking about Hawaii, I remember Hawaii come to be known all over the world when Buddy Brown make the surf movie and bring Greg Knoll, who was the guys that from California went to Hawaii, and then after the films will come very developing, everybody knows, and people wants to come to Hawaii. Talk about that time.
Well, back the first guy to make movies was Bud Brown, and Bud Brown came to Hawaii and shot some footage, went back to California and showed it in small schools and little halls and what have you. And people went, wow, we got to go to Hawaii, because they saw the big waves. So you had guys like Pat Curran, Peter Cole, Fred Van Dyke. All these California guys came to Hawaii in the late 50s, early 60s. And a lot of them decided, hey, we want to live here and make surfing our lifestyle. So like Peter Cole and Fred Van Dyke came and became teachers. And so they were able to teach during the school season, and then in the summertime they would be off and they could go surfing. And so the focus was mostly from California to Hawaii. The Hawaiians were already here, obviously, and they were surfing. And people in Hawaii, they didn't think anything about surfing. They just went, oh, it's something to do. And if you ride big waves, the surfing lifestyle really didn't exist so much, as it was just part of the Hawaiian lifestyle and was taken for granted. Whereas the Californians left California, came to Hawaii and went, wow. And so like the North Shore, the houses on the North Shore at that time were summertime vacation houses for rich people in Honolulu. And in the wintertime, they didn't want to go to the North Shore because of the waves. It was too big. They couldn't go swimming or snorkeling. They would always go there in the summertime when there was no waves. So these houses would sit empty, and the California surfers would all come over and they'd rent a house and stay for 2 or 3 months and surf through the winter. And that's how the whole North Shore thing got going. First it was Makaha, then it shifted over to the North Shore.
Yeah.
So it was the beginning of the development of what we call the surfing lifestyle.
Randy, I remember first time I went to Hawaii, Harold Hawley that I met in Peru picked me up, and I went surf Ala Moana. Then I went surf Ala Moana because it was very popular, Ala Moana, the left, no?
Yep.
We was about 4 to 6 foot, which is a good size. I don't know if you remember. You got a wave, and then at the end of the wave, you have leash already. Your leash broke the guy nose and come back and you paddle out and you didn't know you broke the guy's nose, And then when it come outside, the Hawaii fucking holy. I say, my God, do you remember that time?
Yeah, I don't remember that particular time, but you had to, like I said, we talked earlier, show respect to the Hawaiians, because you're in Hawaii, it's their spot. And even though I grew up in Hawaii, I'm still a Hawaii, and so even I had to be careful, dealing with the Hawaiians. So sometimes circumstances like that happen, and you learn to be nice, and as we said, you show respect, and hopefully they give you respect. But sometimes you break their nose and there's nothing you can do about it.
Randy, we're gonna talk a little bit to know more, but I remember now one family that I love it, I always like to go to Hawaii, and I always like to know the family of the person. Like I met Michael Ho mother, Brian Surratt mother, all the Hawaiians. But one that make me a big, assim, special feeling was the Aikau family. We went to Australia. Which year Eddie went together? Was 75? Was me, all the Hawaiian team with you. I went to Australia, 75 or 76?
That was 76.
76, no?
Yeah.
And then, you know, I was with all the Hawaiian guys, and Eddie Aikau, he was alive, and he come to me. He was a very quiet guy, remember? He don't talk too much. And he come, Rico, come here. I said, wow, I want you to take care of my friend, my brother, Clyde Aikau. And Clyde was a big hair like this, you know what I mean? I said, how I'm gonna take care of this guy, you know? He's so big. He said, hey, I'm gonna go back to how he's playing. He went to Australia, spent one day, and then he come back from Australia to Hawaii to do the the boat drive to the Tahiti. What's the name of the boat? Hokulakea. Hokulea, no?
Right.
And then me and Clyde comes to be together. We was at was in Surfers Paradise or Sydney? I don't know. Anyway, I stayed with him. Then we drove all the way to Bells Beach, you know, and me and Clyde rent a house together over there in Turkey, you know. And we became very good friends. And one night, I'm sleeping, and 2 in the morning, somebody knocked on the door, like something wrong, like it was the police or something. And then I wake up, I went to the door, and somebody told me that Clyde disappeared, you know, in the ocean, in Hokulea, you know. He get out, he paddled all the way to Tahiti in one day or half day in the channel of Maui Channel, no? The boat turned over, and he capsized, and he come back. He tried to paddle to. They stayed there, and he tried to paddle to the beach, and he disappeared. You know, and I have to wake up Clyde and give him the notes. Hey, Clyde, he was sleeping. I said, oh, I have something to tell you. I said, hey, Rico, it's 3 in the morning. Oh, somebody. Then I told the story. He disappeared, and we didn't have much money at the time, so we go with your plane ticket. Everybody go together and go back together. So he didn't have how to go back. So I have like $900. I borrowed him $700. Some guys a little bit, so he was able to do it. It was a very bad time, but this family, Aikau family, I have a lot of respect. You know what I mean? I came to be great friends with him. I used to visit him. We went to Europe together. You know, I visit him in his house in East Side, you know, and so I have good memories, you know. What do you think about Aikau family?
Yeah, well, you know, I was in Australia at the same time because I was the one that organized the big group. You know, there was like almost 20 or 30 of us that all came down together to compete in Australia at that stage. And I remember when Eddie, you know, went missing from the Hokulea, they had a big storm. He said, hey, I'm going to go paddle for help. So he jumped in and he paddled up, you know, trying to go to Molokai or Maui back then. And as you said, he went off and they never found Eddie's body after that. And Clyde, you know, when you told Clyde about it, he, like you said, we were on a group ticket, so you couldn't change your ticket. So he had to buy a new ticket. And I remember contributing as well. I used my credit card so we could buy him a ticket to get back home. And we sent Clyde back to Hawaii, and he went to look for his brother Eddie. And of course, they never found him. And that was the legacy of why they call Eddie would go. Eddie would go for help. And the slogan Eddie would go is when Eddie went and they lost him and never found him again. But the Aikau family was a traditional, really classic Hawaiian family, and they lived in a cemetery. They took care of the graveyards, and it was called Papakolea was the area, and they used to have big parties where they play music and drink beer. And if you got to go to an ICAO party, it was great. You would go early, but you had to leave before it got too late, before everybody drank too much, because at the end of the night, they always like to fight. And so you had to go have a good time and then go, okay, now's the time I better leave before it gets too many beers in those guys. So it was a classic Hawaiian family and a big tradition. And of course, the Eddie Aikau Memorial Big Wave Contest is, you know, in memory of Eddie because of that reason. And Clyde won the first event that they ran for that, and then he, you know, competed in the last one. And unfortunately, Clyde passed away, you know, earlier this year. And so, you know, a traditional Hawaiian family. And as I said earlier, if you befriend the Hawaiians and they like you, they're the nicest people in the world to know, for sure.
I remember very well. Before on a Saturday, Sunset Beach was the place, like Pipeline now, you know. Everybody stay on the beach. We have the house of Bernie Baker, right? Which is our friend, and everybody hang up there, right? And I remember the Aikau family, they have an old Ford, an old pickup, and they stay listening music there, and I met Papa Aikau, so very good, you know, to feel this feeling, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, when I came to Brazil, I would meet as many Brazilian surfers as possible, and I tried to be friendly with everybody. And so every time I came back to Brazil, I was welcomed. I never had a problem ever in Brazil. I know some Hawaiian guys that came to Brazil and, you know, made hassles and didn't respect the Brazilian surfers. And so therefore they were not very well liked when they came to Brazil. So same thing with Hawaii. As we said earlier, if you show respect, you get respect. And if you can have a good time with the Hawaiians, they'll have a good time with you for sure.
Randy, one guy that we cannot forget to talk because I had a great feeling, I have a big admiration, is Mr. Fred Hemmings, you know? Fred Hemmings, for you probably, is the same proportion I am for you. Like he was your teacher, he was one guy who teach you a lot of things. Let's talk about Fred.
Well, Fred was, you know, once again, a Haole guy who grew up in Hawaii, just like me. And he's about 5 years older than me, so half a generation ahead of me. And Fred won the junior and the men's Makaha event 5 different times in between the junior and the men's division. So he was considered the best competitive surfer in Hawaii in the mid 60s. I mean, he beat everybody in all the contests, but a very strong-headed guy. And he won the world championship in 1968 in Puerto Rico. And he realized, you know, his era of surfing was coming to an end. So he changed from being a competitor to a promoter, and he started promoting events in Hawaii. And so the 1970 Smirnoff contest was the very first really professional event. There was a couple events before that with some money, but 1970, Fred put together the first really pro contest, the Smirnoff Pro-Am. And then he started his career in producing events. Well, at that stage, I was still competing. I surfed in the Duke Kahanamoku Classic. I surfed in the Smirnoff contest. But they were very disorganized. At that stage, there was no association for professionals yet. It was still amateur up through, we talked earlier about 72 was the last contest for the world contest. And the death blow of amateur surfing in 1972 ushered in the era of professional surfing. Well, I came to Brazil in 1974, and there was no contest in Brazil yet. And I realized, you know, there in Japan and other places, it would be really good to have competitions for international surfers. So, you know, I helped start the old Waimea 5000, and it was the first professional contest in Brazil. And I learned working with Fred that, hey, you know, if we organize pro surfing, it'll be good for everybody and it'd be good business as well. So in 1975, after traveling to Brazil and South Africa and everything, I came back and I approached Fred. I said, hey, Fred, if I help organize the competitions, you know, will you recognize, you know, professional surfing? So without going into all the details, we created what we call the Pro Class Trials, which is a qualifying event for the surfers who weren't invited to be able to get into the Smirnoff Pro-Am. And then if you made it to that, you could get into the World Cup. And then there was the Pipeline Masters. So Fred was already running 3 major events, the Pipe Masters, the Smirnoff Pro-Am, and the World Cup. I got together with him and we created what was called International Professional Surfing, IPS, which was the beginning, the founding of the World Pro Tour. So myself and Fred were the co-founders, and we created, since I had traveled so much, like I've been to Brazil, I'd been to South Africa, I've been to Australia, I got together with all the different groups and I said, hey, let's come together and form this association. We'll get a rating system where we can rate the surfers depending on the results. We'll standardize a judging system. We'll figure out a way to be able to invite them. Because before that, you got to realize, if you wanted to go compete in Hawaii, you had to have your picture on the cover of Surfer Magazine, or you had to know Fred, be able to get invited. There was no way to qualify. And if you didn't know anybody, you couldn't get invited. So it standardized. And in 1976, we started what was, as I call it, IPS, or International Professional Surfing, which was the founding pro tour, which went to the ASP, and now today it's called the World Surfing League. So it's been 50 years ago that we started professional surfing.
But you remember one story. Before 76 start the IPS, we went to South Africa together, and then to surf the Gusson 500, we went J Bay, and coming back, you say, Rico, to have a world championship, this is 1975. We make 3 contests, have the Gusson 500, one in Australia. We must to do one in Brazil. And we was in South Africa. In this time, 75, all the Hawaiians have to do Johannesburg, Rio de Janeiro, LA, and Hawaii. And say, why don't we make a surf contest in Brazil now? And you say, Rico, how are we going to make a surf contest if you're in South Africa? We're going to do it. Then I call Alberto from Globosat. I call Bruno Hermani, world champion, have diving, and Flavio. And we organized, and we did the first international contest, not official, you know. And then, coming back to Rio, I come with Ibrahim Suede, a very important guy, you know, journalist, and he introduced me Globo. Then I went to Globo with you, I think you remember, and they give it 30 seconds before the national, Jornal Nacional. And then the first trial of the organized was beautiful. You know, 75, who won? Rory Russell. Rory Russell won with my board. You have the picture here? Rory Russell won with a stinger. We have Jeff Crawford, we have all the boys. And this contest have Tuzo Jack was very good, you know, even with, this is my purpose with my board. Remember, can you see it?
Yep.
This is a single fin yet, you know. Well, that's Barry Kanapuni next door, huh? BK, can you see it?
Yep.
BK, one more. This is Rory Russell, one with a stinger, you know. And this time, you believe it, you and Tuzo organized. I brought the idea and come very good. How do you remember this contest? Was a good experience to do next year, the Waimea 5000?
Yeah, well, you always have to start somewhere. And it's kind of like way back in 1964, the Australians started the contest in Manly Beach, and it's, you know, considered by some to be the first world contest. It wasn't as well represented as it could have been the next year, but same thing in Brazil. When you put that contest together, we realized this was the future. The future was professional surfing. So that contest that we were there, that Rory won, it was the beginning of the movement for professional surfing. And then, like I said, the next year we did the Waimea 5000, which became a rated event. So you have to start somewhere, and I commend you for, you know, making your contacts with Globo and the other people, because that was the beginning of professional surfing in Brazil.
I'm very proud of, you know, to be in South Africa. Another thing in South Africa that I remember, in 75, when we went for the Gusson, they have a paddle contest, you know. And the Australia the board should be bigger, cannot be bigger than 7'6". every contest have a paddle contest, you know.
Right.
And then you brought board the South Africans, the Australians, and I didn't have a board. Then I decided to paddle, but I don't have a board, so I decided to ride with a blank. Then I stick a fin in a blank without glass, and everybody say, "Hey, Rico, the Brazilian, this gonna sink." Everybody make fun of me because I have a blank instead of a surfboard. Then I run from the pier all the way to Bay of Plenty. Then I start to paddle. The blank is too light, so everybody go faster than me. Then after I go to the white water, to the shore break, I start to get, and I win the paddle race, you know. So
well, I don't know if you remember that, you know, I'm the one that suggested to use the blank because we didn't have time to make a whole board. So we just took the blank, and I was the one that cut it out and cut out the outline, and then we routed it out and just put the fin in the blank. And we went, well, it's better than nothing. And you know, went on to win that because you were a good paddler. I remember that for sure. So that was once again, you know, the early any attempt at anything like that is where some things start from somewhere. After that, they realized the lighter they could make the boards, the better the paddling would be. And you actually changed their mindset because they used to thought, oh, a heavier, longer, bigger board is what you have to ride. And people went, wow, we can make them lighter and they're going to be even better. So you were ahead of your time.
No, it's good. I'm not talking this to appear, but I think it's a good stories, you know. Like the like the story we went in a van to J Bay, right? Remember that surfing and arriving in J Bay was 6 to 8 feet, perfect, you know, like very cold. Remember that we had a van, right?
Yep.
And then I was all ready to go out, and I went to unleash the leash. How you saw the rubber who hold the board, and when I'm doing this, the rubber just broke my head here. And then everybody went surf, and guys make a bet. And bet he could go for the hospital and go back to surfing. Then I get some stitch here, went surf J Bay. How you like? Good time.
You know, that was, you know, really innocent times when, like I said, everybody getting together, surfers from around the world meeting up at one place, and no matter what, you were going to be going out there. You were not going to sit on the sidelines. So I commend you, Rico, for always having the tenacity to be out there when everybody else was there too.
Yeah, you know, I have a good memories. What's a good memory that you have that we were together, you know? I remember one big Haleiwa, really big, nobody out, was a 12 plus, nobody, big current, you know, we went out late afternoon. Do you remember that or no?
No, I don't remember that one, but I'm sure we surfed together. You know, one memory I really like is when I came to Brazil and we went to Fernando de Noronha.
Oh, yeah.
Back in those days, nobody was going to Fernando hardly at all. It was just, you know, you took a little plane, you flew out there. There was not very good accommodation. It was the old military barracks. And we went there and we drove around and we surfed places that nobody had ever surfed before, because most of the people, you know, surf the main beach break there. I forget what the name of it is.
Cacimba do Padre.
Cacimba do Padre. But then remember, we went to the other part of the island and we named a spot called Abracadabra because there was a song by Steve Miller.
Yeah, people don't believe we named the place because have a left and the Porto is a right. And when the wave come, they come for both places same time. So I say Abracadabra.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, and then, you know, back then there, like I said, there was nobody else but us there. We were there by ourselves. And, you know, because really for me, that's what adventure surfing is all about. When you go to a place and you find a wave that nobody else has ridden and you're the first guys to ride it and you can name it. So we called it Abracadabra. But so for me, you know, with you traveling, especially in Brazil, was great because we traveled up and down the coast of Brazil and surfed many spots that, you know, I had never heard of and before, this is before surfing was popular. So we rode a lot of waves together that nobody else, there's no other surfers there at that stage. So that was, you know, for me, the exciting times during the 70s, especially when we were young, we were adventurous, and we were ready to try anything for sure.
Randy, I remember Fernando Noronha have the big hill, I don't know how to call it, and have a stair, 250 meters high, and it was illegal to go there. And now I have two guys, Trapa and another guy. Trapa is one guy from Bahia. Aloha Trapa, if you see this program, aloha for you. And then say, Rico, let's go to the top. Say, I don't want to go there. Hey, you chicken shit, you don't want to go. And then I finally went up. To go up, it's okay, but to come down, when the clouds go through you, I was scared. I looked like a crab, you know what I mean, coming down, because scary for the high. And I put a nickname if you, Gato, because you was going, tick, 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 going like this, like a cat, you know. And then that was a good memorial, right? Remember that?
Yeah, great times, and we're in flip-flops, just crawling up this giant ladder that was, like you said, 250 meters up in the sky.
90 degrees, right? Like, what was it like this? It was like this, And
yeah, good times, so.
And I remember when you come, we went to one time you came to Brazil, we went to Carnaval, no desfile, desfile principal da avenida, né? Remember this?
Yep, for sure.
Then we went
and then, I remember because, Carnival's during the middle of summer there, and I went out and stayed out all night and partied for the Carnival. I was so tired. I came back and I think I was at Prainha or Macumba or someplace like that, and I fell asleep on the beach, and I passed out on the beach, and my eyelids got so sunburned from falling asleep on the beach that when I woke up, I was completely sunburned, and my eyelids were sunburned. So I went. The next night was a party again, for the Carnival. And I had just red eyes and all swollen and everything. People were like, what's wrong with this guy?
Oh, very, very good memories, Randy, coming because we have to run because we 2096 we're still in the 70s, After South Africa, we start to go. We travel all over the world, Europe, South Africa, Reunion Islands, Indonesia, everywhere. Now. South Africa is a good place to go. I have two good places I like. It's J Bay with Surf Classic and what's the name of Cave Rock? That's a heavy wave, huh?
Yeah, I mean, back then in the 70s was the age of discovery where, I went, after I left Brazil in 1974, you actually went to Hawaii, and I went from Brazil to Argentina. I surfed the coast of Argentina. Then I went to the Caribbean and I surfed about 15 different islands, Barbados and Tortola and different islands in the Caribbean, and then on to Florida. And then after that, when we went to South Africa, from there, I went to Reunion Island, went to Mauritius, to other islands off the coast, to Madagascar. And that was the age of discovery where people didn't know where the surf spots were. There was no internet. There was no Facebook. There was nothing like that. So you had to, it's all by word of mouth. You would say, oh, there's this island off the coast of Africa. So you would go there to try to experience the surf. And same thing, there was no surf predictions, guys looking at weather maps and knowing. You just went and had to hope for the best. And right before I came to Brazil in 74, I drove the coast of Africa, from South Africa all the way to Europe. I spent 6 months traveling through the whole coast of Africa and surfing 15, 20 different countries. So surfing, I think, is a universal sport where no matter where you go, you share the experience of riding a wave. So if you're a Muslim or a Christian, a white guy, a brown guy, a black guy, when you're in the water, everybody's still the same. There's no difference, you're all riding the same wave. So it's a great sport because it shares the experience all together, everybody in the same place. And that's what made so exciting about traveling around the world. And like you said, you being one of the very first Brazilians to go out 50 years ago and spread your stoke amongst the Australians and the South Africans. And, there's great waves no matter where you go. not always good. You know, Hawaii is good most of the time of the year. And that's why Hawaii and Indonesia surfers go there all the time, because there's a lot of waves. But like you said, Cave Rock or Jeffreys Bay, there's tons of other waves in South Africa. And the whole coast of Africa has waves. I mean, they've discovered Skeleton Bay in West Africa. I was there 50 years ago before anybody even knew about it. So if you have the adventure spirit, you go out and you're willing to share the surfing experience, you can have a great time for yourself, meet terrific people, and it's a lifetime experience that you're going to enjoy for the rest of your life.
One thing that I cannot forget, in 1975, we came from South Africa, and came Tom Parrish, Barry Kanapuni, you, Dan Spang. They all shaped for me in Recreio. So I want to thank you very much that you put me on the tour, you know. You talk about your traveling. I get this Norman spirit. Then I love to travel. One thing I still can do by myself, travel by yourself. I learned with you too. You have a small bag, you know, and go, right? So I got this feeling. So I just go myself to all over the world, you know. Other thing I want to thank you, you know, like you start to collect surfboard, and I have 150 boards in beautiful collection, you know. And I see you doing surf contests. I did many years surf contests, you know. So I remember we go Panelão, was a good restaurant before. We drink some wine, good food. Even we don't have money, we can have our old shoes, but we go to eat in a good restaurant, you know. So enjoy good gastronomy, you know. Since young kids, no money, you know. So all those spirit things, you know, like I cannot say 100 times mahalo for you. And this spirit, easygoing you have, nice for everybody. I'm like that too, you know. I go to Japan, people like me, Australia, Hawaii, you know, and, you know, very nice. Make friends all over the world, and be simple, right? That's your feeling, right?
Yeah, well, that's the surfing lifestyle. Like I said earlier, you know, we could have made a choice to take on a profession that made a lot more money, and we'd have fancy car, a big house, and, you know, a lot of money to spend, and, you know, join expensive clubs and clothes and watches and all kinds of stuff. But we chose the surfing lifestyle, and in doing so, we sacrificed income potential, but we've made many times over in friendship, and experience is what they call priceless. You couldn't, doesn't matter how much money you had, you couldn't buy what the experiences we've had. And, you know, I've surfed in 70 different countries around the world.
How many?
And 70.
Wow.
You know, and most people have never been to 70 countries, let alone surfed in 70 countries. So, you know, I've had great experiences, and I'm lucky that I live in Hawaii at Sunset Beach on the North Shore. So my choice of lifestyle has made it for a fantastic life for me. And I have fantastic friends from a lifetime ago, for 50 plus years, like yourself. And I've influenced many people. And I apologize if my influence to you is it led you down the wrong path. But
No,
I
for
like
me,
to think,
for me was great. You know, like I told you, I was a family of lawyers. And the brother of my father worked Caixa Econômica, was the big bank of Brazil, one of the biggest bank of Brazil. He was the president. And I come to Hawaii in 72, and I could see everything is happening now, you know, making money, surf contests, Brazilians doing well, surfing is a great sport. I could see this in 72, you know, like 54. And that was the best choice I ever took, is be a surfer. But took me 30 years for my family believe on me, you know. So I want to thank you 100 times. I'm very proud, and I still have a great life. I make surfboard, I organize surf contests, I do business here, I license my name, you know. I didn't told you, I just licensed my name for the biggest supermarket, 45, and I sell açaí, you know, açaí in a supermarket, and it's doing really good, you know. So I learned with your spirit, make it clean, good business, to know how to make money, because to make money only for surfboards is difficult, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know, there's no surfboard manufacturers that are rich, believe me. So, but the thing that's creative about making surfboards is you know, especially like the old days, like you're talking about with Tom Parrish and BK and, you know, guys who shape boards by hand before computers, before shaping machines. It was really an art to make a surfboard and a board that worked really good for people. And like you had pictures of, you know, Rory Russell, and you had pictures of Mike Purpose riding your boards. And, you know, you should be proud of the fact that the Rico label is, you know, synonymous with Brazil. And the fact that you've been a pioneer of that label and your name has made surfing, it's, you know, you become respectable. People now look at you and say Rico is the patriarch of Brazilian surfing, and that's something you should be really proud about.
Yeah, and humble, simple, you know. So, Randy, just to going to the end of our interview, I would like to talk about the Pro Class trial. You know, was a big contest because have a few contests in Hawaii that the Brazilians could go. Right? Was the Pipeline Master? Pepe was a great surfer
Hmm.
that he rode really good. Pipeline Master. Talk a little bit about Pepe, please, because he's a great surfer and we miss him.
Well, back then, Hawaii and Australia were the two powerhouses of surfing. California was probably third in line after that. The South Africans a little bit, and then, you know, you didn't even know about the Europeans or the South Americans at that stage. So when a surfer came from someplace other than Hawaii or Australia and showed talent, we really embraced that. When Fred Hemmings started the World Cup of Surfing, we invited a Japanese surfer, we invited a surfer from Puerto Rico, we invited a Peruvian surfer, and in this case, for the Pipeline Masters, we invited Pepe Lopes. Now, Pepe had a really natural style, and he being a goofy footer, he lent himself to the waves of Pipeline. So, for an unknown surfer from an unknown country at that stage, Brazil was still really in the backwater. It was long before the Brazilian storm came along. It was amazing to have a surfer that surfed well, looked good, and performed well. And so I think Pepe Lopes was, you know, a pioneer surfer for the early days of professional surfing, and, you know, made us Brazilian proud in the performance that he did, and the fact that he got so far at the Pipe Masters. The Pipe Masters was, back in that stage, you know, still really a specialty event because you had to be a good pipeline surfer. It wasn't, you know, later on, goofy footers started riding backdoor pipeline, and then all of a sudden everybody could ride pipeline. But back then, you had to be considered a good goofy footer to surf pipeline. So for Pepe to have his reputation, I think was a really good mark for Brazil and for himself, obviously.
Randy, so we have the Pipeline Master, the Smirnov, and the Pro Class trial you organized was a contest to give the opportunity to ride in those big contests. Is that right?
Correct. So, like in 74 and 75, I was traveling around the world. I, you know, talked about earlier being through 70 different countries. So in 74, I went up the west coast of Africa. Then I came to Brazil, and like I said, went through the Caribbean. I went to all these different places. So I was gone for 2 years. And prior to that, I was in the Duke meet, I was in the Smirnoff Pro Am, and I came back to Hawaii after traveling for 2 years around the world. And I got back to the North Shore in 1975, and I couldn't get in the Hawaiian contest. I went, wait, I'm from Hawaii. And they said, oh, you've been gone for 2 years. Everybody forgot about you. You know, you don't count anymore. And I said, well, I'm surfing better than ever. I know I could do good. So we went to Fred Hemmings, who was running the Smirnoff Pro-Am, which at that time was the biggest contest on the North Shore. And I said, Fred, if we produce an event and all the guys who are not invited get a chance to compete, will you take 6 surfers and put them in the Smirnoff Pro-Am? And so he said, okay, but you have to organize it. So I went to Jack Shipley, who ran Lightning Bolt and was also the head judge. Went to Bernie Baker, and Bernie actually is the one who came up with the name Pro Class Trials. And we said, okay, we're going to organize this competition. If you can make the top 6, then you get an invite into the. So all these surfers that were really good surfers, but not good enough to be invited, went in the pro class trials. And BK, he won the first two of them. And the third one was won by Carl Smith from Australia. And so Fred took the good surfers, and the first one, I actually qualified for the finals too. So I made it back in to the Hawaiian events. But then that was 75. And I realized in 76, I needed to help organize stuff. And so I switched from being a competitor to being an administrator. And that's when we formed the IPS. So the Pro Class Trials was kind of the predecessor to what is now called the QS events, the qualifying series events that they have around the world. So you go through the qualifying series events to get into the Challenger Series, and then you get through the Challenger Series, and then you qualify for the WSL, the main. And so that was the early days of how you figured out a way to get, as an unknown surfer or unrated surfer, how to qualify for the big events.
In Hawaii, early time was difficult. The Brazilians get into the pro class trials and then the main event. Then Gordinho used to work. He have a leather shop, and he started to do the Chica leather. And you judge Jeff Divine, some good guys. It was 5 years. I won 3 years. Then Renan won one, and Dennis Peng won another. And they come so compatible that Gordinho decided to stop. But was a good start and have good fun. What do you think about this contest?
You know, it's kind of like at Haleiwa, they had what they called the Mabo Royal. All the Japanese surfers would come to Hawaii, and they have a special division only for the Japanese surfers. So I think that's kind of where Gordinho got the idea. He says, okay, let's have a special contest just for the Brazilians. And so the idea was get all the Brazilians together, kind of, low-key event. You don't promote it to, and back in those days, you had to get a permit for everything. So they didn't ever get a permit. They would go to a secondary spot and where it wasn't really that popular. And after 5 years, I remember they tried to get a permit to go to Pipeline. And I said, you guys do not want to do that, because instead of keeping it low-key and really a fun contest just for the Brazilians, if you try to blow it up and make it a big deal, you're going to piss people off. And that's exactly what happened. And that was the era when the Brazilians got really cocky, and there was a lot of Brazilians coming to Hawaii. This is right before Indonesia became popular. So everybody would always just come to Hawaii. And the Brazilians in that generation didn't endear themselves to the North Shore. A lot of people were really bummed out and pissed off at the Brazilians because there were so many of them, and they would all go out surfing together, So you go to Rocky Point and 25 Brazilians paddle out together, and you wonder why they got beat up and hassled and everything. So the Chica contest was a really fun event that was low key, and the Brazilians were lucky that they got that recognition.
Randy, so thank you very much for your interview. It was a great time. I just want to say the last question. How you see the Brazilian Storm are doing in the world now?
I think the Brazilian Storm from 10 years ago was kind of like how the South Africans with Michael Thompson and Sean Thompson and Paul Nadi and Mike Esposito, those guys came along in the 70s. And then you had, the Californians with Tom Curran and that surge. And then, of course, the Australians always had good surfers. But the Brazilian Storm introduced this generation of Brazilians who had watched your generation and the beginning of Pepe Lopes and Otavio and the early Brazilians trying to make their mark. And they picked up on it, and they learned, and they said, okay, we got hungry, and the Brazilian Storm came along. And of course, you've had all the Brazilian world champions since that time. And I think now you've got another generation of younger Brazilians come along, and they've seen what the guys before them can do, and gave them hope that, hey, you can rise above everybody else. And if you've got good enough, you can make it happen. So I think that same thing has happened to a lot of other areas now. There's quite a few European surfers, Italians and French and what have you, that are making their mark. The Japanese are starting to produce some good guys. So professional surfing is 50 years old now. It's matured. And I think if some young surfer decides to make a go out of it, they can do it. So I still think there's another generation of Brazilians to come along for sure.
Randy, I want to do my advertising here. Obrigado, Qboa, essa água sanitária espetacular, líder de mercado aqui no Brasil. Muito obrigado por patrocinar o Aloha Podcast. O Sense também, que é um produto espetacular, um amaciante que tem um cheirinho maravilhoso, um perfume maravilhoso, principalmente para quem usa esportes que transpiram. Também queria agradecer a TIR, Mercado Livre de Energia, que dá uma tremenda força para a gente, patrocina o Campeonato do Arpoador, patrocina a cultura carioca. Agradecer a equipe aqui do Aloha Podcast e o Léo, que dá esse alohinha. Randy, I have something to you. I have some Japanese food here that we serve the inviters, but gourmet, the best Japanese food, but this time I cannot promise you're gonna taste, but sometime when I go to Hawaii to see you, I invite you to go in a Japanese restaurant, and I want to tell you something. I'm gonna go to Noronha very soon, So after how long? 25, like 40, 50 years after, I'm gonna go to Noronha, So and muito obrigado. Queria finalizar em português aqui, minha gratidão, Randy Rarick. You understand Portuguese a little bit, no?
Mm-hmm.
So
yep.
to finish, thanks for the sponsor. Esse programa é que mostra a cultura. Eu entrevisto vários campeões mundiais de surf, big riders, small riders, e queria deixar de coração minha gratidão por tudo que você plantou na minha vida, porque você foi o maior influenciador de tudo que podia passar para a minha cultura. Muito obrigado, um beijo no coração e aloha, Mr. Randy Rarick. Thank you for the interview.
Mahalo and muito obrigado, and to all my friends in Brazil, aloha.
And I will see you soon. I love to Hawaii. I love to go to Hawaii. As soon as we're going to go sunset, okay?
Looking forward to it.
Aloha.
Aloha.